Now that we know how to use functions that operate on records in an individual row, and we also know how to use aggregation functions, we should be able to slice and dice our data in interesting ways. Here I am on Bard in a brand new conversation. And here is what I want to do with SQL. I use comments to specify the individual steps in the operation I want Bard to perform. A table named orders, I want to compute the average sales per segment. Notice that I've used the select keyword kind of as a leading hint to Bard that I want a SQL query for this operation. This keyword select serves as a guide for Bard so that it doesn't go down the path of trying to perform this operation in Python or Java or some other programming language. And Bard correctly generates some SQL code for the operation that I asked it to perform. What I'm going to do now is only copy a part of this SQL query and not the all of it, because I want to first turn your attention to this group by clause that Bard has introduced in this query. This time, the average aggregation is to be performed for all records for the different segments that the global superstore serves. This is a little different from the aggregation operations that we performed before, where we perform the aggregation across all records in a table or only for records that matched our conditional filter. To compute an aggregation per segment, we need to group our data based on the value in the segment column. And this is done using the group by clause that you see here on line 3. Group by segment will take unique values of segment across all of our orders data. For each segment, this group by will give us a list of orders. Notice my select clause. I select the segment and then I compute the average sales. Now, this average sales will be computed across records for each segment. And when you execute this query and see the result, you'll understand exactly how this group by aggregation works. Our superstore operates in three segments: consumer, home, office, and corporate. And the average sales in each segment is roughly $246 to $249. The data was grouped thanks to the group by clause, and then the aggregation was performed on these individual groups to give us the final result. I'll just rewrite this query so that we don't have all of those extra decimal places. I still group by segment and I compute the average sales, but then I round that off to two decimal places. And here is the same result in a more readable and interpretable form. When you're performing a grouped aggregation, you're not limited to just one aggregation. You can perform multiple aggregations. As you can see here on lines 3 and 4, I compute the sum of sales as total sales and also compute the average sales per segment. And the result will give me two bits of information broken down by segment: the total sales for each segment as well as the average sales per order part for each segment. Grouping and aggregation is one of the most common operations that you'll perform in SQL. Here is another example of something that you might want to compute on your table. In the same orders table, could you compute the total sales, total profit, and the average discount, but this time based on subcategory? Since I've said for every subcategory, the grouping will be based on the subcategory field in our data. I'll just copy this query over and we'll understand this better once I've pasted it into the editor. There seem to be some new clauses here. I'll explain those. First, turn your attention to line 3 where we have group by subcategory. Since we want the aggregations for every subcategory, the grouping has to be on that column. Next, in the select clause, let's see what aggregations we are performing on the subcategory. We compute the sum of sales as total sales, sum of profit as total profit, and the average discount as average discount. Bard has introduced a new clause here at the bottom at line 4, order by. Order by allows us to sort the results in a certain order. This ordering or sorting will be performed after the grouping and the aggregation. So it's the grouped aggregated results that will be ordered. Bard has chosen to order by the descending order of total sales. Let's run this query and take a look at the results. Let's round off the numeric values to two decimal places. You can use Bard's help for this, but I'm simply going to rewrite my query. We already know how to use the round function. I pass in the sum of sales, sum of profit, and average discount as an input argument to the round function and round off to two decimal places. Now let's execute this query and you can see the result is easier to read and understand. For every subcategory, phones, copiers, chairs, etc., I have the total sales, total profit, as well as the average discount that the superstore gave on its orders. Let's try a slightly different grouping and aggregation operation, and this time you want to view some statistics by country. You now know that it's the grouping that has changed. Notice on line 9, I group by country. Then in my select clause, I have selected country. I've also selected category. Let's say I want to view some category information. And then on lines 4 through 7, I perform a bunch of aggregations to compute total sales, num orders, and so on. You might say, okay, and you try and execute this query, and boom, there is an error here at the bottom. Let's see what the error says. I'm going to copy the response over and paste it into the editor. Now, the error is rather clear, but if you're a SQL newbie, it might be confusing. Expression number 2 of select list is not in group by clause and contains non-aggregated columns. Now, if this is incomprehensible, let's turn to Bard for some help. Now, you'll have to give Bard a lot of context so that it can debug. So I first tell Bard what I try to do. I try to view the following aggregations grouped by country and for each category using this command. However, I got this error and I've copied the error in. What does this mean and how do I fix this? Now, Bard unfortunately gives me a rather complex fix as its first option, where it asks me to change the group by mode for SQL. That's something advanced. We'll not focus on that. Instead, let's take the fixed query and I'm going to copy and paste that into the editor and explain what the fix was. Now, when you have a query that performs a grouping operation and then an aggregation on certain columns, the only columns that can be present in the select clause are those that are present in the group by clause or columns that you're aggregating on. In our earlier query, category was not part of the group by clause and was not a column on which we performed an aggregation. If you want to include details about the category, it has to be something that you group by or that you aggregate. Notice here the change I've made is on line 9, where now I group by two columns. I group by country, and then within each country, I'm going to group the records by category. And now on lines 2 and 3, I have country and category both as part of my select clause. This is allowed. Earlier, we did not group by category, nor did we aggregate category, and that could not be part of the select clause. In this query, in addition to grouping by country and category, we also order by country and category. Let's execute this query and take a look at the results and understand what's going on. Since we are grouping by two columns, records that have the same value for country and category will be in the same group. Notice how our groupings work. First, we group by country. So for Afghanistan, there are three categories of products that were shipped: technology, furniture, and office supplies. So we get aggregated results for technology products in Afghanistan, furniture products in Afghanistan, and office supplies products in Afghanistan. And this is true for each country. SQL first found all records that belong to a certain country and then further subdivided based on categories and then gave us the aggregated results. Let's try a different query where I group by multiple columns, group by market and segment. So the records will be grouped by market first, and for each market, it will be further subgrouped by segment. Let me tell you upfront that there is a problem with this query. Let's see if you can take a minute to figure this out. When I execute this query, it's going to be an error. All right, I'll execute this query and you can see the error there. Let's copy the error over. I'll paste it in the editor and we can see what the error is about. Expression 7 of select list is not in group by clause and contains non-aggregated columns. And this refers to the quantity column that I've selected on line 8. Notice that it's not part of group by and it is not aggregated. So I haven't computed the average of quantity or the sum of quantity, nothing. In a grouped aggregation, your select statement should only contain group columns or aggregated columns. So let's fix this by computing an aggregation on quantity. I perform a sum operation on quantity and I group by market segment and order by market segment. And let's take a look at the results here. Notice that each market has been subcategorized into individual segments and we get the total orders, total sales, total profit, average discount, and total quantity sold for each of these subcategories within the market.